Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to How to Print Money with Cold Email Outreach. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I'm a program assistant at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. And so as you will see in the chat in a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. Second, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event, so please make sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to get to all of them. All right. Texas, Bahamas, awesome. Pittsburgh, Maryland, lovely. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple of polls just to take a step back and see how everyone's doing today. And we'll use this information to guide the wellness programs that we provide for our global community. So the first one's going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? I'll give everyone a few moments to submit their answers. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, share the results. Looks like optimism is in the lead. Survival is definitely up there as well with some feelings of anxiety and fear. So we're going to try to address those feelings today and in our future programming. And then let me launch one more poll. What is keeping you up at night? This helps us kind of gauge where you're at in your journey so we can provide programs that meet those needs. Awesome. Give everyone a few more moments. Thank you. Thank you. Gonna end the poll, share those results. All right, sales is in the lead. Finance and marketing are up there. And then we got some skill, team, and surviving. So we will keep that in mind for our future development of programming. I'm gonna stop sharing that poll. All right, and without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, Sam Sunmonu, partner at 8Cast Corporation. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to hand the floor off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, Anna, and Colin, and everybody at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And thank you for everybody joining in, it looks like from around the country and around the world. I'm super excited to speak with you guys today about how to print money with cold email. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen so everybody can see, right? Okay, perfect. So how to print money with cold email. So just some quick things. So a quick background on me. Let me start my timer. I have worked pretty much most of my entire career in startups and small business. I started out in finance at a fintech startup called EvoSpend up in New York. And one of the interesting things about that experience was I was the first employee, and I really got to get hands-on experience in entrepreneurship and was handed the reins to have a lot of responsibility. Unfortunately, that venture failed. And one of the reasons why was because we didn't really have a sales pipeline. And so anyways, a few years later, I ended up kind of switching career paths a little bit and getting into sales. And since then, I've held a number of business development roles at startups such as Evermed TV, Elite Gaming Live, Fin, and a few others. And so one of the core skills that I was able to cultivate over the last few years since 2016 has been cold email and effectively printing money through cold email and building pipeline. And so today I have quite a comprehensive set of information that I would like to share with you guys. And so we're going to kind of split it up into two sections. So the first few parts are actually going to be sections 1 through 6. We're going to go through some of the goals of cold email outreach. We'll talk about deliverability. We'll talk about creating lead lists. We'll talk about putting your contacts into sequences and automating that. We'll also do a little bit of strategic planning. So what does it mean to come up with the hypothesis and test that out? What does it mean to effectively scale your cold email outreach, maybe by hiring a virtual assistant or SDR? And then what are some of the tools that you can use to make your cold outreach more efficient? And then the second half of the workshop that we'll get into will actually be going through some cold email opener frameworks, and we'll actually come up with a sample cold email. And then after that, we'll talk about some follow-ups and best practices. And then towards the end of the session, there will be some Q&A. So buckle in, let's get ready to rock, and here we go. So the first section that I want to talk about is just the goals of cold outreach. So obviously printing money with cold email. What does that really mean? When we do cold outreach, what we're really trying to do is generate a pipeline of interested leads for salespeople. That could be, yourself as a founder, CEO. It could be if you have a VP of sales. It could be if you have an account executive. But cold outreach is really one of the fastest ways of generating revenue. So inbound marketing is amazing, but oftentimes it can be very expensive and lengthy, and there's a lot of skill involved in it. And inbound marketing is a very important aspect, but sometimes cold outreach can be just much faster and much more effective, especially for earlier stage companies. And it can also be effective for smoothing out a pipeline, right? A lot of inbound companies that do inbound very, very well, they might have like this boom and bust cycle with their lead generation, with their pipeline, and outbound can help fill in those gaps and keep it consistent. The other key goal of cold email outreach could also be customer discovery. So reaching out to new companies or people with the intention of discovering and learning more about their needs and pain points and refining your product, service, or messaging.
Hey, Sam, are you able to make this in presenter mode quickly?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm trying to.
I think that little
right, from
at
Kurt.
the bottom right, or.
Okay, perfect. Can you guys see a lot better now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to be bouncing around a few different screens. So Michelle or Anna, please interrupt me if you think that I can zoom in a little bit more to make things more user-friendly.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, so all right, so just a quick note on deliverability. So cold email outreach is surprisingly technical. And there's a few best practices that you want to think about here. So the first is setting up a separate domain for sending cold email outreach. So the strategy that we're going to be going through today, and we'll talk a little bit about spamming versus the cold outreach that I'm recommending, is going to be highly personalized and relevant. So the odds of you being marked as spam will be low. Still, that being said, you generally want to create a separate domain from your main domain that you can send out cold emails under. Just in case anybody does mark you as spam, your main domain and your ability to communicate with customers, suppliers, vendors, your own employees doesn't get impacted. The second set of best practices is to ensure that you have these three components set up correctly. And they're called your SPF, your DKIM, and your DMARC. And what they really are is their authentication records. This is very kind of like IT technical thing, but basically what they do is they let your email service provider know that you're not like spoofing or spamming or doing anything malicious. So they're really security protocols for making sure that emails can flow back and forth between domains without any risk of somebody, being compromised maliciously. So these are just a quick set of notes on setting up your deliverability. And to manage your SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, you can use a tool like easydmarc.com. There's also MX Toolbox. There's a bunch of different providers out there that can help you. There's resources online. So I didn't want to get into too much, but just kind of wanted to start with that quick primer. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So just a quick note on spamming versus the email that we're going to be talking about today. So legitimate cold email is legal under GDPR regulations. So GDPR, some landmark regulation that began in Europe and of course is also relevant in America. And it's basically designed around data privacy and marketing, kind of which this falls under, right? And so you can send people cold emails, but for spamming, generally what we consider spamming, or I would consider spamming, is sending a large volume of email in a short period of time that's not personalized. So meaning sometimes people won't even include things like first names, or it's just really not relevant. It's just like a generic templated copy, right? Like, for example, sending the same email you would send to a director of finance to a CEO, right? They care about very different things. And so when you interrupt people and you don't think about the relevance behind it, chances are they're going to mark you as spam, and it's very easy for them to do so. And then the last thing is you don't give the user the ability to opt out. Now, some cold email marketers recommend not putting an opt-out link in your subject lines, in your email body. I do and don't, depending on the case. If I'm doing very personalized kind of outreach, then I won't put an opt-out link because it's pretty much like sending an email one-on-one. But if I'm doing something that's maybe a little bit more mass-based and skewing a little bit more on towards the relevant side of email, then I'll include that the ability for them to opt out of an email. Okay, so now that we've got that down, I wanted to quickly talk about creating a lead list in Apollo. So I'm going to walk through just building a quick list in Apollo. And the reason why I love Apollo, let me hit escape. How do I? So can everybody see my screen well enough here? Do I need to zoom? Let's zoom in a little bit. So Apollo is a powerful tool. It's very cost effective. It's probably one of the leading B2B, I would say, sales intelligence tools on the market. So it's a comprehensive suite of, they've got millions of records of companies, as you can see here, 64 million here, and people. Their highest tier plan is about $99 a month. And with that, you get 10,000 email credits and 50 mobile dials. So if you're talking about value for your buck as far as tools, Apollo is going to be one of the better ones. There's a number of tools. ZoomInfo is probably the biggest and the best contact finding tool on the planet. It's also one of the most expensive. You're going to be spending at least a couple grand a month on an annual contract with them. It varies. They have all different types of discounts, but you're looking at a 5-figure investment, whereas Apollo, is pretty affordable. You're looking at a 4-figure investment over the course of a year, of course, depending on how many licenses and seats that you have. The other powerful thing about Apollo, which we'll get into a little bit later, is its ability to sequence. And so you can pull contact information from Apollo, put them into email sequence and send those out and have all of your automations, your follow-ups, automatically removing people when they reply, done. But for now, let's just kind of go through how to quickly build a list in Apollo. So is Apollo just for the US? That's a great question. So most of the campaigns that I've done have been US based. But I do believe you can go in here and you can find, I believe probably Europe. I'm not sure about, some other countries, but I do believe that they probably are available in other countries. I definitely know Europe for sure. And they have quite a big database of companies that you can pull from. So for example, if I wanted to search here for, let's just do like Africa or EMEA, right? Let's do EMEA and see. So it's going to go in here and actually filter by, those number of records. You can see here I've got 24.16 million records. So that's like one of the basic filters. So let's just do quickly, New York, just as an example, because that's where I currently am right now. So let's do New York, New York. Let's say I want to reach out to people that have, or companies that are, more than 100 employees, but less than 1,000. I can go in here and select all of those individual ones. So you can see here, as I do that, my filters update. I've got 5,000 records. Let's say that I want to find, let's say I'm reaching out about, maybe sales development, and I want to find companies that have relatively few salespeople. So I could actually go ahead and do that. Let me see if I can find sales in here. Okay, cool. I could actually even set this, maybe, let's do no more than 5. So it's going to go through and filter. So there's a ton of different filters. One of the things I love about Apollo is that I would strongly believe they scrape LinkedIn for their data. So here's a sample profile. Actually, is a fraternity brother of mine from Duke that I went to college with. And so what's cool about Apollo is that you can actually, if you have Sales Navigator, it works very, very well, where you can save lists of contacts from Sales Navigator in it. Or if you're just browsing LinkedIn in general, you could come in here and save people's contacts. You can view their email addresses, if they have a mobile phone number attached to it. You can add them to a sequence. So it really is just like one of the most powerful tools on the market. So let's hit apply filter really quickly. So now we've got like a list of companies, right? And so let me zoom out just a tad bit. I can filter here or sort, by a variety of things, and I can save this to as a saved search. One of the things I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to pull in. Let's select 10 companies from this list, and then I'm going to hit find people. Now this is where things get really cool. So I can hit find people. Now it's going to give me a list of 2,400 people across those 10 companies that I just searched for. So from here, I can filter down even further. And, let's say, for example, if I wanted to do personas, let's say I wanted to do CEOs, I could go in here and hit CEOs. You can set all this up on the back end. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but this is how I would go about building a list in Apollo, in combination with LinkedIn. So it's just a very, very robust and powerful tool. And once again, very cost effective. I also have a little bit of a bonus content in here for you guys as well, called creating lead lists in Sales Navigator. So there is I recorded a Loom video, I believe sometime last year, and it's still relevant. So if you have a chance and you have questions about how to do the same thing in Sales Navigator, I have about a 5-minute video that kind of goes through from a very high level how to create your own list there. Okay, so now let's talk about sequencing leads in Apollo. So once I have my contacts, so I'm just going to hit X out of here. Hit X out of here. I can go into my sequencer. So it's under the engage, and you're going to see sequences. And so this is an account that I use actually to test out different campaigns for my own business. And so I'm just going to click into one of these just to kind of give you a basic structure of how Apollo works. So you can see here, we sent this out to 144 different people. About 63% of those opened, and we had about an 8% reply rate. And so what I can do here is I can literally set up a sequence of emails. So this was just a simple 3-segment email that I wanted to do. You can see here I have my subject lines. I have a template linked here. So one of the first things you'll notice is there's a little placeholder for first name. And then I've got my marketing copy here. Here we were testing out some Loom videos, and then I've got a little subject line. So I can go in here and set up a series of emails, or also I can add in LinkedIn, I can add in phone here, and I can add different contacts from that previous screen that I was just showing you. So when I was showing you how I was adding these different people, I could actually come in here and click add to an existing sequence or add to a new sequence. And I can just select here from the drop down, and then they will flow through. So whatever information I have on that contact will flow through the merge tags that I have set up in Apollo here. Let me just quickly, okay, there's lots of questions that are coming in here. Let me just address the ones that are relevant to Apollo versus Sales Navigator. Yeah, Apollo and Sales Navigator are complementary. They definitely work very, very well together. Let's see, is there anyone else? The others, some of these I do have quite a bit of stuff that I want to get through, so I will pick some of these a little later to go through, maybe towards the end. So, but just keep them coming in, and I'll definitely answer them in their due time. Okay, cool. So that's just like a quick little segment on how to set up a sequence in Apollo. So I want to get into outbound planning. So I was reading through some of the pre-submitted questions, and I think this is really important. So once you're able to find the types of companies and people you want to reach out to, and you have some of your copy, how do you actually go about reaching out to people? So what I came up with is a framework. So oftentimes when you're doing cold email, you're often testing hypotheses. So you might say, hey, let's say that I have an HR staffing business, and I think that manufacturing right now is they're short staffed, and I think I can help them reduce their time to hire by 50%, right? I might set that up as an experiment and say, hey, if the total universe of companies that I want to reach out to is about 1,000, maybe 200 are going to fall into a certain industry, maybe another 500 are going to fall into another industry, so on and so forth. So I created this little framework for you guys so that you could be very, very scientific in how you're reaching out to your target segments. So let's just take this first experiment. So let's say we have 200 prospects that we want to test this out under. And let's say I want to test out the different titles. I want to see if I send out a cold email to these various titles, which of those people are going to respond to me, right? So I could use this framework to eventually figure out what are the titles that are most likely to respond to my emails, and I can hone in on that. As a result, improve my my meeting rates, my reply rates off a cold email. Similarly, you could do the same thing for your industry. So you can come up with a list of industries that you think are good to reach out to. Some businesses will have a tighter list of industries. Some will have a much broader range of industries. It really depends on your product or service that you're selling. I think that was actually one of the questions that I had. So does cold email work better for certain industries and businesses than others? Yes and no. So definitely B2B cold email works very well. B2C cold email can work very well. You just have the potential to be marked more as spam, because for most B2C businesses would probably be served using some type of inbound marketing strategy, just because when you're doing B2C, you need more scale. When you're doing B2B, you generally need fewer customers to make more money, generally speaking, right? So cold email can be very effective. Also, when you're selling to decision makers, generally there's like a committee at a company. Sometimes it could be just the CEO if it's small enough, but generally you have to sell into individual people. So I think cold email works a little bit better for B2B, but people do use cold email for B2C. So hopefully that knocks out a few of those questions that we have here. The other ways in which you can test are also by company size and then by call to action. So for example, you can ask for a meeting, you can ask for a response, maybe you ask for a referral. There's different things that you can test. The last components that I want to talk about for your outbound planning are looking at a funnel. So here we have a sample funnel. So let's say your goal is to do $100,000 in revenue, and you have a contract value of 5,000. This means that roughly you would need 20 new customers, right? Now, if you have, let's say, about a 20% close rate, meaning that for every 10 opportunities or 10 people that you speak with, you get 2 new customers. That would mean you need 100 calls. And then if you have about, let's say, a 10% meeting rate off of cold email, right? So for every 10 people I send a cold email to, I generate 1 meeting. That would mean you need 1,000 prospects. Now, not every call you have is going to be a qualified prospect, right? So let's say on average, 70% of the people that you speak with are actually qualified. So your realistic number of cold email prospects would be about 1,400. And so I created this funnel for you guys to think about planning my cold outreach. So, you have to come up with a realistic number of people that you could potentially reach out to. You're going to back into it using some of these assumptions. Now, some of these, if your business is mature enough, you might know what your close rate is. You might know what your meeting rate is off a cold email. You might know how many meetings convert into opportunities. Some of this might be some guesswork for different companies, but at least it's going to give you a good framework to answer those questions. And then, because I think nowadays, for many of the people here, you might be, a solopreneur or a small team, maybe you're a founder, CEO, and you've got so many different hats to wear, and you're probably used to hiring virtual assistants. I also created this little framework for you to figure out how much it would cost to hire some support. So let's say you can hire a VA that can do on average 5 personalized and relevant emails an hour. Well, if you've got 1,400 people to reach out to, that's 286 hours. They're working a 40-hour week. That's roughly going to take them 8 weeks for you to build enough pipeline to get you 100,000 in revenue. So then if you're thinking about, what the cost of that VA is, you could even put an SDR in here too, and you could put an hourly rate, let's say like 25, 30 bucks an hour plus commission. The math will run through. You're roughly looking at here at spending $4,000 on that resource, which is roughly $536 per week. So I created this just to give you a little bit of a guideline for how to project out your funnel, and then how to effectively hire and budget for a resource to help you do this. Because one of the things about prospecting, it is very, very time consuming. And so sometimes if you've got a lot of different hats, you want to hire somebody to kind of help you run this process so that you can do it effectively, versus, being kind of scattershot and all over the place. So that's going to conclude this first segment. There's just a couple of things I want to touch on. So I did create a little checklist for you guys on cold email. So this will be shared with you all after the presentation. So this is just from everything from deliverability to copywriting to your ICP to sequencing, just some key questions for you to think about when you're launching your cold email campaigns. And then I also just created here a sample cadence for a sequence. I'm using email, calls and voicemails, LinkedIn, and just to give you a sense for, how many touch points you can have in a campaign. Okay. So now let me set my timer for the next portion. All right. So let's talk copy. And let's start with the subject line. So let me share my screen. So there's some best practices for writing copy. So one is you want to write your subject lines almost as if you were writing an internal email. Sometimes if you write subject lines that are like too marketing focused, like for example, like 10x your sales this year, or reduce your costs by 75%. People are instinctively just going to feel like you're marketing to them, and they're going to tune that out. So generally you want to write a subject line as if it was an internal email, or you want to do something that like piques their curiosity. Generally, as it relates to cold email, shorter is better. Longer can work if they're highly personalized and relevant. And I'll show you some examples of campaigns I've done in the past. And then as in anything marketing related, and especially cold email, you always want to be A/B testing. So always A/B test your subject lines. In Apollo, it's pretty easy to do. You can just go ahead and enter in a different subject line and paste and copy the same body content in there, and you'll start to see those stats come through. So for example, here's some examples from a campaign that I've been running for clients. You can see here we've got a range of different opener emails here. So the copy is all the same. This is for a client that sells events to cannabis. They have a series of cannabis events, and we're trying to find sponsors for them. And so, they have got a strong DE&I focus. Of course, there's a little bit of a marketing angle. And so I created this campaign so that we could test out and see which subject lines win. As you can see here, this 2023 DE&I initiatives got the highest open rate and the highest click rate. You could see this one didn't really perform very well. So it's interesting. Apollo kind of randomizes all of this. So this first one got the most, but we have a little bit of some statistical significance. So these are like very short very punchy. So I put the RE in front because it kind of looks like there's like following a thread of emails. And so once again, it kind of looks like an internal email. So I find that sometimes those can be very effective. So these are just some examples. Some examples of ones that are a little bit longer, but still get good open rates are, here we're really relevant. It's like we're focusing, there was a few clients, I did this earlier on in the campaign. It wasn't very scalable, but if you have a resource, you can, of course, have them do this. But, I focused on finding a few really relevant details about a particular account or prospect, and then put that in the subject line. And it actually worked very, very well. I got really high open responses. In this case, I put this company's mission statement in there. And so it's a little bit more time consuming to do, but you're going to get very high open rates. I also included a list of, I guess some of these are generic subject lines here. So this is from AJ Goyle. AJ Goyle, he works at GMass. I believe he's the CEO of GMass, which is one of the larger cold email sequencing platforms in the world. And so he has some great subject lines that you can basically steal that can pique people's curiosity. Do be a little bit thoughtful with these because they're kind of generic. So if you do these, make sure that the body of your email is amazing. So that way you don't piss people off. They're like, hey, quick question. And then, it's a terrible question, right? Or a terrible email. That could probably piss somebody off. A lot of people also use these types of subject lines too. So if you want to stand out, you might want to put your own little spin on it. So quick workshop, let's write a subject line. So we've gone through some of those example campaigns, and let's write a subject line that's relevant to their ICP. So I would love for you guys to, just type it. If you feel comfortable, type in the chat. We'll take a couple, a minute or so and just come up with something that you think is unique. Let me go back one slide. Oops. There are a couple slides. All right, let me look at these. While you guys do that, let me look at these chat responses. Okay, I'm glad this is helpful for you guys. Okay, solving your skills gap, like it. You ready to speak up? Name, okay, awesome. I like that one. Let's see, advantages of Wi-Fi 6. Okay, good, very technical. So if something like that, you definitely want to be speaking to whomever that user or economic buyer is, probably like a CTO or IT person. So good one, Sal. Anybody else have any other suggestions? Quick question, AJ, are your employees well? Okay, that's good. Piques the curiosity. I can help speed up your takeoffs. So yeah, Rachel, I think it's a good start. I think if you could be a little bit more specific, maybe if you added like a first name in there, that could be really powerful too. Cultural consultant available for your school's professional services needs. So yeah, Melissa, great start. You got some good stuff in there. I would just find a way to see if you could shorten that a little bit. Also, whenever we're drafting any copy, we always want to think about the prospect. We don't want to think about ourselves. So the thing I would tweak about yours, Melissa, is to just be a little less focused on your offering and a little bit more focused on the problem that your prospect is facing. Amira, let's not play games. I like it. It's direct. Please help me spread the words. Okay, Stacy, solid. But once again, just want to think about that prospect, right? So, if you're asking for something up front, most likely people are going to kind of tune it out. Okay, so cool. So this is awesome. So I think we've got some good responses. I just want to keep it moving, of course, because, these workshops take up some time. I think we've got about 10 minutes before the Q&A. And I want to get through some body copy. Okay, so copywriting best practices. So this is for the body of your email. So generally, you want to keep your email short unless there's a compelling reason to say more. And I'm talking like 100 to 150 words max. That's like a general rule you want to stay under. Ideally, if you can get your copy down to like 75, 60, 50 words, even better. It's an incredible challenge. If any of you are have Twitter fingers, this could come in handy for your cold email outreach. But generally you want to keep it short unless there's a really compelling reason. I have run campaigns that are a little bit longer, like 150, 200, 250 words. It really just depends on the demographic and your product and service that you're selling to. So yeah, this was for the subject line. So yeah, write your subject lines if you're writing an internal email. This is like a really important note about personalization. Personalization is all the rage, and for good reason, because B2B cold outreach, especially via emails, I don't want to say it's played out. It's definitely not played out. It's very effective, but so many people are doing it, and so many people are doing it poorly, that you run the risk of, you are just like everybody else, you run the risk of your messages not getting read. So you can personalize an email, do some research on a prospect's background, but if your email copy isn't relevant to them, like for example, let's say you're sending an email to a CMO, right? But like it's actually relevant for the CFO. That's normally who like it would be relevant for. Like that email's not going to work with the CMO because she doesn't care about whatever problem or solution you're talking about, right? That's the CFO's thing. So you always want to, ideally, so you don't even have to personalize your emails necessarily. I would recommend doing it, but if you nail your relevance, that alone is going to get you results versus just personalization alone. This is just a general rule as well here. You can ask for meetings. In fact, you should. That being said, it's worth playing around with what we call like softer call to actions, trying to get responses. And I'll go through some examples of those. And then the last thing is like, most B2B messaging is boring. So like, don't be afraid to be creative and push the button, of course, respectfully, right? But like, insert jokes, use emojis. Sometimes you can use GIFs, maybe not in your first emails, but like, you know, throughout the chain, be creative. All right, so we've got about 7 more minutes. I have 5 cold email frameworks here that are going to work really, really well for you guys. Some of them are highly personalized. Some of them are a little bit more relevant. There's 2 here that I have from Winning by Design. I'll just quickly explain this one. It's called Relevance, Reward, and Request. And it's really powerful. So one, you want to do something that's relevant. So you want to showcase a piece of research. Maybe you've done some research on their background. Maybe you have some industry research that you can synthesize for them. Generally, you want to have a reward, right? So instead of just asking, why not give something first? Maybe that's a link to an article, it's a video or a case study. And then you have your request. So sometimes people put like multiple call to actions in one email. That's a no-no. Just have like one clear request. So this is like a really easy framework for most people to wrap their brains around. Doesn't really require much and can be very effective. This second framework is also from Winning by Design. It's called the Provocative Framework, and it's highly researched. So like, for example, like let's say I'm going through let's say I'm reaching out to Microsoft, big public company, right? I'm going through their annual report and I'm looking at their strategic initiatives for 2023, and I'm sending an email to Satya Nadella. I would use this kind of format to like get him to respond, right? I'm doing like super like a high level of research, right? Here you can see I maybe have talked to you know, a few members of Satya's team, right? And you know, I'm compiling all of that into a very concise, you know, 150, 200 word email that I'm sending to them. So this works very well for startups or people that are like new, companies that are new or selling something innovative, and you need to get people to think differently, right? You know, if you're just sending out kind of a generic email, you might miss the mark with them. But if you can actually do a little bit of research, a little bit of digging and showcase like why your solution is important and get them to think differently, that could be very, very effective. So this next framework is from Anthony Natoli from Lattice. I follow him on LinkedIn. He's great. It's going to be one of the emails that we'll kind of work through. And so here you can see, given you are leading blank at company, feels like you might be focused on X, Y, and Z. And then he's going to insert a problem statement. He's going to insert a solution to problem, and he's going to have a soft call to action. It's worth exploring, and he's going to sign off with his name. So this is like a really powerful, these are some really cool frameworks for you guys to leverage for your cold outreach. So I did put 2 more in here. I don't have time to go through them because we're almost towards the Q&A. But really quickly, in the next 4 minutes, I wanted us to take a stab or start writing our sample cold email. So we already have some subject lines already written. And so hi first name, you don't have to worry about that one. You don't have to worry about this first sentence that's personalized, but I would love to see some sample problem statements, maybe some sample solution and transformation statements, and then followed by a soft call to action. And a soft call to action would be something like worth exploring. Would this have any interest at your company? Does this resonate with you at all? You know, sound interesting, right? So something that's not necessarily, hey, let's jump on a 30-minute call. So let's take some, the next few minutes before the Q&A, and let's go through a sample cold email. I'm going to look at some of these responses. Oh, these are great. So maybe let's start with some problem statements. So I'd love to see just a few problem statements. I wish you had a little bit more time to go through these, but if we can see some problem statements in the chat, that would be awesome. Okay, Shamil, ways to combat poverty. That's the subject line, probably. The mental health, good, Stacy. The mental health crisis in our nation is almost insurmountable. That's a great start. Anna, heart disease remains the leading cause of death in the world. Yeah, that's a really powerful one. That's going to be very evocative. Wheats, did you know that over 84% of food brands fail to claim the attributes they qualify for, which represents a massive lost sales opportunity? Okay. With EatQ, you can easily identify possible attributes you may be able to claim. Do you want to pilot with us? Okay, actually, that's a really solid email. Like, that's something that you can test out and see if it works. A few things that I would just A/B test around that are, instead of saying with EatQ, you can easily identify possible attributes, try maybe talking about a customer or hypothetical customer and what they're getting, the benefits. So say like, hey, Joe's restaurant is getting X, Y, and Z. Do you want to partner with us? That could be a thing to A/B test. Or you could even say, hey, would this be interesting? Are you seeing this problem at, company? Okay, let's do Melissa. Yes, there are layoffs, but we know 75% of you are looking and can't find talents locally. Here's what you could do. Okay, awesome, great. Like that would be really powerful for just, you could give like an insight there. Say like, here's how clients are solving this, right? Because like you want to give something of value and then you can ask for what you want. So I think that's really good, Melissa. See, Ash, we've talked to hundreds of HR professionals who don't feel valued by their leadership. We want to help you show your strategic value. Does this sound like you? Okay, great, perfect. You nailed that to a T, Ash. Angela, running a business and trying to keep up with your finances and taxes can be daunting. Yes, anybody running a business knows all about that. See, and Jody, using paper to verify meeting attendance is cumbersome, prone to error, and is difficult to trust. Love it. That's awesome. Sukesha, are you struggling to teach in virtual classrooms? Oh, it looks like we've got some ed tech people in here. This is great. So awesome. I think these are some really good ones. Michelle, Anna, do we have more time? Do we have enough time? Should we do Q&A or?
Yeah. If you have a little bit more that you wanted to go through, no
sure.
rush. And we can just jump into the Q&A whenever you're ready.
Okay, cool. I'll read a few more. Let's do Bill. Do you know the 3 reasons most ERC applications are declined? Love it. That's a curiosity piquer. Charmaine, hi. It is more challenging for employers to retain valuable employees. Paying attention to their wellness is a key way to show you care. We specialize in wellness programs. Would you like to learn more? I like that. So Charmaine, just because I've actually done a few of these HR ones, like you might want to talk a little bit about either some like statistics or, you can mention things of like employee engagement, retention, all of that type of stuff. It can make it much more impactful. Maybe even say like on average, it costs $20,000 to retain a mid-level employee. Are you seeing any turnover in your business? See, Lauren, Center for Disease Control and Prevention reported almost 1 in 5 adults has a mental illness in the US. Great. 71% of adults have at least one symptom of stress. Employees are looking for are looking to work for organizations that value their overall wellness, and we partner with you on this effort with our workshops. Worth exploring. So I think that's great, Lauren. So I would A/B test, maybe just doing one like stat, otherwise it could get a little bit long, but overall I think it's really good. And then just something you want to also A/B test as well there is like, we partner with you on this effort with our workshops. So I would A/B test some smaller or softer call to actions, because sometimes when you go with partner, they can get a little bit hesitant. But I think it's good. So you just want to A/B test it alongside with some other tweaks to see what gets the most responses. Let's do Sal. Hi, Director. We recently upgraded the Wi-Fi at 2 Hudson County parks in New Jersey to Wi-Fi 6, and the public loves the faster speeds. City Hall has already received calls thanking them for the upgrade. We'd love to discuss how we can help your county upgrade to Wi-Fi 6. So Sal, this is actually an awesome email. So we'll do a few more minutes. This is an awesome email because you're really leveraging some social proof there. And if you're reaching out to a lot of these parks or governmental organizations, that's going to really pique their interest. One thing that I would just A/B test with your call to action, well, you don't really have a call to action, so that's kind of the first thing. Like, I would put a call to action there, like worth exploring, when to jump on a call. The other thing is sometimes you don't want to necessarily be assumptive. It might be interesting to say, hey, are you considering upgrading your county, your Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi 6 this year? Another thing you could do is you could even probably look at, allocations that some of these state governments are doing. So let's do one more before Q&A. Let's do Anna Jones. Did you know that 52% of adult children are balancing work and care for their aging parent? I love it. So awesome. There's been some really, really great responses. Hopefully you guys have gotten a lot of value. And, I didn't want to just do a workshop where I just send information to you guys. I wanted to actually have it be interactive, so you could really come up with writing cold emails quickly. And well, the last thing I'll say about this type of cold email writing is you need to iterate quickly. Like, you don't want to sit there banging your head against the wall for an hour writing, a cold email. You should probably get it out in 10, 20 minutes max, and then maybe do like 3 or 4 more, call it a day, and then maybe come back the next day and tweak and then send. It's much better to get data and to iterate quickly than it is to come up with the most perfect email. Because to be honest, sometimes I'll send out personalized, amazing, well-written emails, and then I get no responses. Sometimes I send out things that are not personalized and relevant. Maybe it's like a follow-up or something, and that's what get people's response for whatever reason. It's just a random opportunity. So I guess we can move to Q&A now.
Awesome. This was super helpful. Thank you so much. Let's just kind of jump right in. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, we could kind of just do like a little chat. Just right off the bat, we have a couple questions about some of the terms that you use throughout. So first, can you talk a little bit more about like, what is A/B testing? What does that mean?
Yeah, so A/B testing is a concept that allows you to, it's basically setting up an experiment. So what you want to see is what performs better. So when you A/B test, you have a variable that you're testing. So let's say it's a subject line. So you keep your body copy the same, and you say, hey, I want to see which subject line performs better. Is it A or is it B? Now you can also do C, D, E, F, so on and so forth, but that's you're testing variables to see what's moving the needle. So ideally, when you're setting up your experiments, anybody who's maybe done statistics or just any kind of marketing, you always want to isolate one variable in a campaign. So it might be a subject line, it might be a call to action, maybe it's a problem statement, a solution statement, but A/B testing is just a framework for experimenting.
Awesome. Super helpful. Thank you. And then the other term that people had questions on was, what is a qualified lead and how do you recognize them?
That's a great question. Marketers and salespeople and CEOs have been fighting about what is a qualified lead, but a qualified lead, it really depends on the business. A sales qualified lead, as it's called, SQL, it could be as simple as somebody that raises their hand, says, hey, I am interested in your solution and I want to schedule a call with you. It could be that simple, or it could be more complex, right? Like, think of like maybe companies that have, let's say the Wi-Fi, business, right? It could be, hey, maybe the city has a certain amount of budget. that we're looking for that can be profitable for them. Maybe we've identified that they have a need to upgrade. Maybe their systems are failing and there's a clear need to move to Wi-Fi 6 versus legacy Wi-Fi. So it could be that complex. So it's quite a spectrum, but it really depends on your business. And what it is, I would say the metric is this somebody who could potentially benefit from my product or service and get a transformation? And do they have the money to potentially pay for it?
Awesome. Those are great questions to ask.
Yeah.
And then, so let's kind of just jump into some of the other questions. So Apollo is a really great tool.
Yeah.
I think people really loved it. If that tool doesn't really work for someone's budget, what are some other ways to source reliable emails or email lists?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, Apollo's going to give you probably the best bang for your buck on the market. But there's so many of these tools. I actually have a list of some of the bigger ones in my presentation, which you guys will get after the call. But Apollo's going to be great. Your next closest competitor to like Apollo as far as affordability would probably be like hiring like a virtual assistant. Sometimes on those you could do as little as 12 cents, maybe as expensive as 25 cents per contact, but they're going to be pulling from tools like Apollo, Wiza, Lucia, etc.
Right.
So Apollo is actually really, really good bang for your buck. Now $99 is the highest tier. They do have a $49.99 one, and then there's a few others that are maybe a little bit cheaper. But there's a million of these different companies.
Awesome. Good to know. So people can go kind of figure out what works for their own business.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. We have a couple questions here about, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. So like, does cold email work best with certain industries, certain businesses, or is it not really like a straightforward answer? It kind of just depends.
It can work with any business, just some business, so SaaS, obviously, right? It's gonna be great. But really mostly I would say any B2B. The other thing you want to think about with cold email, actually, this is more relevant and this goes to any sales channel, is what is your contract size? So if your product or service is $50, right? Which is fine, that's probably, cold email is probably not going to be effective for you because you just need so much scale. So you're probably better off with some type of inbound marketing. But if your product or service is $10,000 and somebody needs to speak with the salesperson, cold email is going to be very effective. So it's not like a hard and fast rule, but generally like the more expensive, the more technical, the more expertise is needed, cold email is going to be very effective because everybody has an email. Most people read their email. Most people make decisions via email. So it's going to be effective for many businesses. But I would say probably B2B is going to be effective. And then generally the more expensive, the more technical, cold email can be effective. Otherwise, the ROI may not be there with the cold email outreach program. You could do it in the beginning stages just to get some traction. If you've got a cheaper product or you're still new and you don't have enough data to say, hey, I know what my ICP needs, so I can run a marketing campaign. But for certain types of businesses, it might be better to eventually transition to inbound than to do just pure outbound. So
awesome.
Hopefully that gives some context.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And so we had another interesting question here. How can you speak to some of the barriers that international business leaders might face when utilizing cold email?
Yeah, so definitely GDPR. So if you're in Europe, they're much more strict than we are in the US. So like you can get blacklisted. Your company can get blacklisted pretty easily, I believe, in Europe. So candidly, I don't have as much experience outside of Europe and the US. But yeah, I think the biggest issues with international are going to be in the US and in the EU. I would say probably more people are comfortable communicating over email. But I think email is still going to be much more effective than phone. So I think, so I think email is going to be effective, but there may be a data quality issue. So it might be more because these big companies scrape mostly US and EU emails. You might have issues on, like, let's say 75% of the contacts in a database are actually good or Apollo. This is like roughly 80, 75, 80%. It might be lower when you're reaching out to international companies because they may not, Apollo may not scrape those companies as often. So you may run into some data quality issues. But generally what you could probably do for something like that is you can always hire a VA to do additional research for you. There's really not much that you can't hire somebody nowadays to do off Fiverr or Upwork or something like that.
Sure. Awesome. Super helpful. And so, you mentioned, hiring a virtual assistant or an SDR and that easing this process. If you're somebody who has hired that kind of employee, how can you best support them with the job that they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, first I would say if you're hiring a VA, you have to know, first of all, you have to know what to do. So a lot of times what I've noticed when people hire VAs, they expect, let's say you're paying this VA $8 an hour. This is an extreme example, right? Most likely that's not going to be the most strategic of people. They can be, but generally you have to give them very clear instructions. And so what I like to do is use lots of Loom videos. I like to do the first, like if I'm doing something for a new client, doing their cold email outreach, I'll actually do the first 5 to 10. Or I'll have them do 5 to 10, and then I'll review it and I'll give them very concrete feedback.
Nice.
We'll also go very strategically. So maybe if I'm reaching out to 1,000 people, I'm not going to do all 1,000 at once. I'm going to do 50, maybe 100 and test and see how it goes. So you definitely have to give them very clear instructions, record lots of Loom videos, document everything, and really be like super clear about what it is that you want them to do, and like break tasks up and break a project up into smaller tasks. Don't think that, just because it's clear in your mind, it's clear to them.
Right. Yeah. Super important. Awesome. And so then we are just out of time, but if you had one piece of wisdom that you wanted the audience to take away today, what would that be?
Wow. Yeah, it's a good one. I'm going to keep it classic sales. Always be prospecting. The challenge is if you're consistently trying to send out high quality emails, or you just have a mind for like experimentation and like figuring it out, you're going to figure it out. The problem sometimes is especially with sales, it's so hard, right? It's like you get overwhelmed, you deal with a rejection, you might send out 100 emails and nobody responds. Stick with it, continue to troubleshoot, because you're going to figure it out. It's not impossible. Ask for help, YouTube, Google around, you can figure it out. So that's the one piece of advice I would give, is always be prospecting. That's how you're going to grow your business.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so incredibly much for taking the time to speak to the community, share all of your insights, and just set such an incredible overview on behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today. We sincerely thank you for joining us. Awesome. And if you are still in the audience, we would love for you to join us for our upcoming webinars. You can view them in the link in the chat that's going to be posted. And thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.